I feel people should come see Marilyn Mom and Me because, at the risk of sounding egocentric, it's a very important play. It shows a side of Marilyn Monroe that people have not seen before. It certainly shows many sides of Eileen Heckart, an important actress in the American theater and in film and television that many people have not seen before. And one learns so much, not only about the relationship between these two women and about Marilyn's career and about Marilyn as a businesswoman and as an actress, but also the mother-son relationship, which is something very universal. And the fact of this son desperately seeking acceptance and love from a woman who is also trying to find those same things. Um, it is very funny. It is very moving. It is a real heartfelt Valentine to the world of movie making, to the theater, to actresses, and to mothers and sons all over the world. I think it will be a very riching and rewarding experience for everyone involved. Hi, my name is Luke Yankee. I am a playwright, director, actor, producer, and theater professor, and I am going to talk about my new play, Marilyn, Mom, and Me. Listen to this interview to find out more. So, from the time I was very young, when my parents would have parties, or in later years when my brothers and I would have parties, and my mother would sort of start down the path of telling her showbiz tales, which she loved to do. She loved to hold court. If people would say, Eileen, what was it like working with Marilyn Monroe? She would get very quiet and she would get very tight-lipped. And if people pressed the issue and she really started talking about Marilyn, invariably she wound up in tears. And my mother was known for playing these kind of hard-boiled, crusty, tough customers, which was really very much what she was like in many ways. Of course, that was a facade. I mean, she was a jellyfish underneath, if anyone really stood up to her. But she loved to sort of play the kind of brusque, tell them all to go to hell kind of characters. So the fact that she would burst into tears every time she talked about Marilyn Monroe up until the day she died was really profound to me. And I knew bits and pieces of her stories about Marilyn and working on Bus Stop, but I really started doing some research on that. And I was directing a production and in Manhattan Beach, and I vowed to myself, I was listening to audiobooks about Marilyn Monroe all summer long, and I vowed to myself as soon as the play was over that I would hole up at my place in Palm Springs in the August heat and would not come out until I had a draft of this play. So I started realizing more and more as I put various pieces together that when Marilyn Monroe shot the film A Bus Stop, where my mother was cast as her best friend, at this point, Marilyn was the biggest star in the world. And she had taken the year off, the year before that, to study in New York with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio. And she had become the epitome of the method actress, where one has to feel everything organically. And since my mother was playing her best friend, Marilyn was determined, as the ultimate method actress, to make my mother her best friend. And at first, it made my mother very uncomfortable, and she was thinking, who's this starlet who's kind of glomming onto me and making me feel very uncomfortable? But ultimately, the two of them really bonded through their wounds. And both women were adopted. And as a result of that, among many other things, for all that they both achieved, Marilyn in films and my mother mostly on Broadway, neither one of them ever felt that they truly deserved a place at the table. There was always that sense of the missing piece, always that sense of, I'm not worthy of this. And so in this play, Marilyn, Mom, and Me, the premise that I have set up is that a 40-something Luke learns early on in the play that his mother is terminal with lung cancer, which indeed happened right around the time of my 40th birthday. And so, in order to get at some basic truths about their relationship before his mother dies, he is unraveling her complex relationship with Marilyn Monroe and interviewing her about Marilyn and really getting at the essence of why this woman always made her cry every time she talked about her. So it is a deeply personal play. I am very emotionally exposed in this play because, backtracking a little bit, when I holed up in Palm Springs in the heat of August to write the play, and I said, I'm not going to come out until it's finished. Well, within 3 days, I had a very solid first draft. The play just came pouring out of me. And so I realized so many things about my mother and about her relationship with Marilyn Monroe. So I kind of go back and forth between these two stories. I set out to write a play about my mother and Marilyn, and I wound up writing a play that was every bit as much about my mother and me. So, thus the title Marilyn, Mom, and Me, because ultimately it is a son making peace with his very complex relationship with his mother through the lens of the chaotic world of movie making with one of the biggest stars in the world at that time. What I want the audience to get out of this play, boy, there's a great deal. That's a challenging question. But basically, I want them to see another side of Marilyn because it also shows Marilyn not in any way as a victim. It shows her as a shrewd businesswoman, a brilliant actress, and someone who really understood the camera and her own image in an extraordinary way. I want them to get out of the play the sense of this very complex mother-son relationship. And ultimately, it is, I mean, while I paint Marilyn and Luke and Eileen kind of warts and all, it is by no means an expose. It is by no means a negative story in that sense. It's ultimately a son coming to peace with his mother who's passed away. And while he might not have agreed with some of her choices in parenting at the time, ultimately he learns to see where they were coming from, the good intentions behind them, and he's able to forgive his mother on a deeper level because ultimately forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. I think in some ways it is easier to write a play that is so personal, and in other ways it's more difficult. It's and one of the things that I learned when I wrote the memoir, Just Outside the Spotlight, again, because it's a memoir, it's a deeply personal story. There would be times that my husband would get up and I'd be sitting at the computer sobbing, going, nobody's going to give a damn about this. And it's such a personal story. And one of the things I realized, and as the head of playwriting at Cal State Fullerton, this is something I tell to my students, the more personal you make a story, the more universal it becomes. Because when the book came out and I thought, oh, well, this is such a personal story, it's going to sell about 3 copies. I got letters from people all over the world saying, your relationship with your mother was just like my relationship with my Uncle George or my father-in-law or whatever it was. So, again, because personal emotions are universal. And one of the things I explore in Marilyn, Mom, and Me is that whole sense of these two women, Eileen Heckart and Marilyn Monroe, who on the surface were so totally different. I mean, Marilyn was so fragile and vulnerable, and my mother had the appearance, at least, of being very much a hard-boiled, flinty, tough cookie. But ultimately, they both wanted to be loved. They both wanted to be accepted. And at the time, as I mentioned, Marilyn was one of the biggest stars in the world, and yet she wanted what my mother had. She wanted a stable marriage. She wanted kids. and she wanted to be taken seriously as a legitimate actress. And the year before they shot Bus Stop, my mother had won the Golden Globe and had been nominated for an Academy Award for a film called The Bad Seed, which she had also done on Broadway, where she's playing an alcoholic woman whose son has been murdered. And she only has 8 minutes in the entire film, and it's absolutely gut-wrenching. I mean, and Marilyn strove to be that kind of actress. And I think it's sort of ironic in retrospect that many people do consider Bus Stop one of her best performances, if not her very best performance. And there is an even deeper level of vulnerability in her performance. And she has so many scenes with my mother that I kind of like to think that maybe the chemistry between Marilyn and my mother somehow contributed to that. And another thing I'd like to share about this particular project is, needless to say, there are thousands of things written about Marilyn Monroe. And so people often ask, well, Luke, what are you contributing that is new? Well, there is very little that is written about Marilyn's relationship with another woman. There is so much written about her relationships with JFK and Arthur Miller and her acting teachers, who were female, by the way, and on and on and on. But there really isn't anything else out there, to my knowledge, about another woman who was a contemporary and someone with whom she really bonded on such a deep level, even though it was for a short period of time, as often happens in show business. But it was a connection that really changed my mother's life. And as I explore in the play, ultimately, it changed mine as well and helped me to understand my mother on a deeper level. What I think would surprise an audience member watching this play is really the things one learns about Marilyn Monroe. Because at this stage of the game, people tend to think, what new information could there possibly be about Marilyn Monroe? But I think people, as I said before, they see a side of Marilyn they haven't seen before. They see the side of her that wanted to be a wonderful mother, the side of her that was such a good businesswoman, and because Marilyn didn't have many female friends, because a lot of women were threatened by her because of the blatant sexuality and because of just how men were just so smitten with her. So to see her relationship with another woman who was an equal and who was a peer in many ways, uh, it really gives a unique perspective on her that I think people will appreciate. It is a real heartfelt Valentine to the world of movie making, to the theater, to actresses, and to mothers and sons all over the world. I think it will be a very enriching and rewarding experience for everyone involved. My name is Luke Yankee. Yes, it's my real name. I am a playwright, a director, an actor, a producer, and a theater professor. And I am very excited to talk to you today about my play, Marilyn, Mom, and Me, about my mother, the Oscar-winning actress Eileen Heckart, and her intense friendship with Marilyn Monroe during the shooting of Bus Stop. You can find out more about the play on my website, marilynmomandme.com. That's and all spelled out. Or through my other website where I talk about my other projects and my other books, which is lukeyankee.com. That's LUKEYANKEE.com, just the way it sounds. I'll see you at the theater.